Hello, I'm Dr. Andrew Sargent. Welcome to my course, 101 Most Misunderstood Verses. We're coming to you today from Sacred Fire Church in Bellevue, Florida. Come on by. Today we're going to be considering Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go. We're going to find out that there's a lot of quotation marks that need to be put around the translations that have been given in this proverb. I actually have a bunch of titles for this proverb. So in today's title, the one that's on the slide for us is Who Put the Should in Proverbs 22:6. We have other ones like Train Up a Child and Everything's Your Fault. We have Train Up a Child. If you train up a child in the way you should go, you are misinterpreting Proverbs 22:6. It's one of our favorite proverbs. We love this proverb. Let's read it in a few different versions, which really sets the course for the problem. One of the big problems here in this verse is bad translation, sloppy translation. And another problem is going to be a false expectation for what a proverb is. If I gave you a proverb outside of Scripture, you would understand that it's a proverb. It's not the 5 words that encapsulate every moment of every minute of every second in the human experience. It's a guide, it's a direction, it's a truth that you need to wrestle with. But let's look at the translations that were given, which really begins our problem. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's the ESV, English Standard Version, and the KJV, the King James Version. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he grows older, he will not abandon it. The New American Standard Bible. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Teach your children right from wrong, and when they are grown, they will still do right. CEV. Awful on so many levels for so many reasons. We have to ask ourselves, yes, is that anybody's experience with their children?
No.
The inclination of man is to selfishness. The inclination of man is to corruption. And we're supposed to throw in a poorly represented proverb to say that children are these blank slates, and that what we write upon them is what they will become. It's nonsense. They are bent to evil, and we are wrestling with that selfishness in our children while wrestling with our selfishness in ourselves, or sometimes not wrestling with the selfishness in ourselves, and then trying to deal with the selfishness in our children because their selfishness irritates our selfishness. And then somehow out of all of this is supposed to be this promise, do right, get right. Not only do I not think that that's what the proverb teaches, but I don't even think this is what the proverb says.
It has been my observation throughout the years that the people who take this seriously are so regimented in their children's lives. They keep them focused on this legal path. The girls have to do a certain thing. They have to dress a certain way. They can't deviate or veer or stay on the straight path. And that's how they're thinking, that they're training them up in the ways of the Lord, because they're legally binding them to a way of life.
Definitely, we need to look at all of what the Scripture has to say. So we were talking about it before we started today. This toggle switch mentality, and this is what you're talking about. I'm going to take this living being, and I'm going to act like they're a slate that I can write whatever I want on. No, they are a human being. They have a will. They have a heart. That will and that heart is bent toward evil. Some are bent hard toward evil. Some are bent soft toward evil. Some are malleable. But I'll tell you, even among my own children, the ones that were most malleable were also most manipulatable when they were among their friends. It was easier for me to bend them to my will, and it was easier for their friends to bend them to their will. Whereas the child that I wrestled with the hardest was also very resistant to the pressures of the people that are around. Not completely immune to it, but very resistant. So there's a lot. There's a child rearing is messy because you're dealing with messy people. It's messy because you're a messy person dealing with messy people. And if we're going to have to deal with what a proverb is in order to understand what this proverb means. So let's consider, this is one of the most quoted potentially mistranslated verses in the entire Bible. That's why it's in the list. How many weeks of your Christian experience do you go without hearing this from somebody somewhere at some time? In a sermon, in a Bible study class, it is just there all the time. Man, I tell you what, we hammer in the wall like a hook. This is our great hope, our great promise. So it's the glorious divine promise in parenting. Do right and they'll be right. And they were ever Adam and Eve in a perfect world, in a perfect environment, right? We are inclined toward selfishness, inclined toward evil. We are in a stream. And if we do nothing, we float downstream. And if you want to go upstream, it's like you got all these Marxists and stuff, even some very famous Marxists that everybody just loves them so much, who will talk about poverty. Poverty is unnatural. It's man-made. What? No, poverty is the most natural thing in the world. All you need to find poverty is nothing. It has been the lot of the human race for most of its existence, almost every human being on the earth throughout human history, up until the last couple centuries. The lot of man has been poverty. The question is, what shall we eat? What do you feel like today? Chinese, and some Italian, Vietnamese, Cambodian. We sit around wearing clothes that we didn't have to make, that we could get for free if we wanted. The laundry is doing our wash. The stove is cooking our food unwatched. Our microwaves do it in minutes. Weird things can happen, but our life expectancy is in the 80s. It was how people sit there and go, there's this tribe in Africa, and they don't punish wrongdoers. When somebody does wrong, they have a love circle, and they live this way, they live that way. And I go, they're also in perpetual war. Enslave their women, die at the age of 40. This culture doesn't have any cancer. Yeah, because they're dead by 35. Okay. All right. So what we lack is this kind of comparison we often are not making. We don't even begin to understand the struggle that these people were facing, the circumstances that they had to overcome. We are so bent in our understanding of the world. Like, for instance, we are so accustomed to Western civilization and the impact that Western civilization has had on those raised in Western civilization. We don't know that we're almost in an artificial high of goodness. You go to the rest of the world, go to the places where the gospel has never penetrated. Violence, rape, theft, everything is deceit and cheating. Right now, I'm reading a whole series of books for North Koreans that have escaped, talking about their lives and what their daily existence is, and infidelity, and everything's cheating and alcoholism. It's just unbelievable. Humanity is bent in a particular direction. We are floating downstream. Wealth is unnatural. Goodness is unnatural. Goodness is clawed for. Wealth is clawed for. We have it in abundance because we spent centuries cultivating the values that produce wealth and produce goodness. Those values are all dying. And when the values die, everything that those values create dies. Chaos is coming to us. Chaos is already upon us in a certain way. You can't kill the tree and keep reaping the fruit. But people don't recognize what we've accomplished as a civilization as the fruit of centuries of labor and value production. They think it's, so they sit there and say, poverty is unnatural. Man created it. No. It is the most natural thing in the whole wide world. Everything bends. The whole of human history and economics is called the hockey stick. Because you have this long, flat handle. And then only in recent times do we tip. Really got to understand what is the proverb trying to say, and understand what a proverb is. All right, so it becomes the anchor of hope for people with wandering children. By the way, don't ever mess with people's anchor of hope. They won't thank you for it. That to be a very hurtful thing, a psychologically damaging experience. So I recognize when I do a lot of these 101s that I'm meddling with a lot of stuff in people's lives. And I think for the good, but they don't always take kindly to it. So this is an anchor of hope for wandering children. This woman sit there and say to me, and I think I've shared this story before, when we were doing the unforgivable sin, I think I shared it. My son, he's such a bad boy. Drug dealer, he traffics girls. She didn't say traffic girls, she just said call him a pimp. Does drugs, sells drugs, does this, does that. He's very violent. He abuses the women he has relationships with. And she goes, but I remember when he was 11 years old, went up that aisle, and then she texts on, she talks, and she goes, the scriptures have promised me, a promise from God, that if I raised him right, that in the end he'd be doing right. So it turned not into this idea of continuing in the path, but this hope that if you did something good for them when they were a kid, that no matter what debauchery they experience in their middle years, and when they're old, they'll have this return. That is not at all what this is promising. It's not what this proverb is, but it's this kind of this promise of return as opposed to the promise of steady Eddie.
Parents are exonerating themselves.
Yeah. What did they have hope? My daughter goes off to college, and the university's got my 3 oldest kids. Just got them. I even sat them down on the day they went to college. I had each one of them had the big speech. You're about to go into an encounter. Your mind is going to expand. You're going to suddenly see all new possibilities. You're going to have information flying at you, and your professors are going to seem very convincing. They're hold steady to what you've been raised in. One speaks and seems right until another rises to question it. Know this. Your professors will overwhelm you with their arrogance, but the things that they're teaching you and the worldview that they will give you does not hold up under scrutiny. But you will not be in the mood for scrutiny when your world goes from being this big to being this big. You're overwhelmed. You're swept away. Anyway, it's an anchor of hope for people who have wandering children because they misunderstand the proverb to suggest not this promise of steady Eddie, but a promise of prodigal return. Yeah, it's a dangerous thing to meddle with a person's hope. And if their whole hope for their children is set on this promise, what they think they've received in this verse, and you mess with that, they will not thank you. Now, it also becomes a judgment against every parent whose child does not make good choices. To those with wayward children, do right, and they'll be right is an accusation. It's a condemnation. You blew it, your kids are paying the price. Everything that your children do wrong is your fault. Now, sometimes it is. Sometimes people are just rotten parents. Sometimes you make a call and it wasn't the right call. I was having a conversation with my son at one point, and he said, you guys are pretty easy to lie to. My wife said, are you boasting that you're abusing our trust? We're not gullible. We can know more than you think we know. And you will pay the price. We have taught you right. We have put you on the path, told you the decisions you need to be making. If you are rebellious and you think you're pulling one over on us, the only person you're hurting is yourself. Our hearts will hurt, but we will be okay. But your life will be damaged by the choice that you're making. We are not foolish. We are not gullible. And shame on you if you use another person's trust in order to abuse them and abuse that trust. But anyway, you blow it. Your kids have paid the price. It's all your fault. Everything's your fault. So what went wrong? All right, the proverb has a potentially mistranslated phrase. It also has a somewhat misrepresented term. It has to do with this concept of train. You should notice one thing that is in common with every single translation is they started with the word train. The word does not mean train. It means something else. And it's not the typical word for training and disciplining discipleship. Matter of fact, if we were legitimately translating the word train, it would be the only time that the root of that word in any form is used for that meaning. It would be what we'll call hapax leganda, a one-time thing, a really weird thing. Matter of fact, this word does not mean this. The proverb has not been read carefully in regard to all that wisdom literature has to say about parenting. In other words, people memorize this verse for parenting. They have not memorized all the Proverbs for parenting. And they have not read all that Scripture has to say about parenting. Scripture has a lot to say about parenting. Deuteronomy has a lot to say about parenting. There are many proverbs about dealing with children, and you have to read them all together. It's not like one thing carries everything. You go through scripture, you're building a puzzle, you have this verse and this verse, and some are on this edge, and some are on this edge, and some form a top, and some form a bottom, and some fill the middle in. Some are part of that picture, and some are part of that thing. But that's what it all is in the scriptures, this massive puzzle. It doesn't even answer everything, but for the practicality of life, especially the weirdness of modern life. Like, who could have necessarily anticipated what a smartphone would mean for the mind of a generation? So the very way that they think about reality. When I was a kid, it was the Walkman. All these projections of what it would mean for us, and we all laugh. So the proverb has not been carefully read in regard to all that wisdom literature has to say about parenting, and the common interpretation misses the spirit of Proverbs in regard to children. Children are not blank slates that you get to write upon. They are bent in a particular direction, and you have the responsibility of doing everything in your power to convince a volitionally free human being to turn themselves in a particular direction. A willful child who is foolish and stupid and resents every attempt to be taught and trained will go bad, no matter what you try to do. The heart of the child is the heart of folly. And it says that 1,000 blows on the back of a fool do not accomplish what a word accomplishes in the heart of a wise person. So some children will be willfully stupid. Some will be wise. In trying to figure out the world, I figured that the adults in my life knew a bit more than I did about things, and that I should probably pay attention to them because they've been there, done that. And while I didn't think that any single adult had all the answers for life, I was very keen to pay attention to the experiences that they had and the lessons that they learned. I wanted to hear every story that they could. I would sit with my grandparents and talk about the Depression, talk about growing up in farms, talk about what life was like here, what life was like there. My uncle was a bus driver during the Depression in Chicago, but his wife was raised on a farm. All my aunts and all my uncles and my great aunts and my great uncles and my grandparents, and I didn't know any of my great grandparents, but I would listen to stories about them and try and learn from their mistakes and try and direct my life. I listened to the adults. I didn't listen stupidly because I would recognize that adult was not going or living the way that I thought life should be lived. That's not the good life, But so I've had family members who, even as small children, were bent to evil, bent to corruption, and were very pushy back. You took them to an art gallery, and they are standing before the products of some of the greatest artists in the history of man, and they thought they were going to go smart because they were going to hide behind a column, lest anybody make them learn. They would try and coax my own kids.
Here, let's hide over here. Auntie, let's hide over here, Mike.
My kids, have you seen that painting? Why would I want to hide here? She would rather sit and hide behind a column going, than go and explore the great artwork of the world. My wife's uncle, he was like, I would ditch school, but because the school was on my property, I couldn't really go anywhere, so I'd lay in a ditch all day. I put one over on you. You didn't teach me anything today. You're going to have to deal with some people that are bent that way. Children are not blank slates. So you have to really look at the big picture. We have to deal with this idea that the heart of the child is folly. Sometimes no matter what you do, a person is bent toward evil. They're a hard heart, and they are absolutely determined. You will not teach me. You will not hinder me. I will do what I want to do, and you will not constrain me in any conceivable way. I think that basically describes the heart and soul of most of the people in power in our country right now. They are wicked, wicked people. And they are determined. One person said that our constitutional republic is dead, and we now have a kleptocracy, basically a band of thieves and criminals running the country right now, using all of their power to conceal their crimes and to prevent anybody from stopping them from the crimes. Like, have you noticed how many crimes have been exposed by major players and nobody's going to jail? Where are the trials? The only trials that we're having right now are for the one guy who's trying to hold them accountable for their crimes. He goes on trial. All right, now the tricks in Hebrew poetry, and this were really tricky. The way the poetry works, it's a little tricksy. The genre of Proverbs have been mistaken for divine promises. Potentially mistranslated phrase. When I say potentially, I'm just playing the scholar. Potentially, absolutely, mistranslated phrase and misunderstood term. It's not read carefully in the context of parenting as a whole or the nature of the child as a whole. The Hebrew poetry's got some hinky stuff in it. And we radically misunderstand the nature of a proverb as a divine promise. Proverbs aren't promises. Proverbs are suggestions to push you in a certain direction. There are things that are meant to guide you on the path. You don't surmise the whole of existence in 5 words. 5 words that are meant to be memorizable, influential, and to capture some aspect of a fundamental truth of reality. Not a divine promise that if you did right to your kids when they were 5, no matter what you think you see happening in their life right now, they are coming back. This is not even a proverb for prodigal return, even if they do translate it right. It is a proverb of steady Eddie on the path. So the troublesome translation of Proverbs 22:6 stems from fundamentally the phrase, in the way he should go. There is no in the way he should go. It's not what the phrase says. The Hebrew is more obscure than that. So even this idea, let's take a look at this word should. When we say should, we're dealing with a class of verbs that are called modal verbs. So verbs deal with tense, voice, and mood. Tense, voice, and mood is type of action and time of action. Voice is the relationship of the actor to the verb, whether it happens to them, whether they do it, even from something that you act upon something, or you simply act an action that has its own behavior as its own end. Showering, singing, you might say, well, I sang a song, well, even that's kind of an action. Then when you get to mood, mood has to do with the relationship of an action to reality. And so we actually have the mood or the modal verbs. And these modal verbs suggest that the actions are not actual, but have some other alternate relationship to reality. So if I say, I will go, am I going? No. I'm saying I will. So what is that? Is that a future? So it's a future intention. It's my intention to go. Maybe I actually will do it, but for now, saying that I will, it's not actually happening. It's talking about I intend to go. But what if I say should? I should go. Does that mean going? It means kind of like I ought to go. I declare it the right thing to do or the expected thing to do. In English, our main verbs are very present. We recognize them. Will, may, might, could, can, would, all kinds of words. Able to, that's the can. So it's ability for action, expected action, right action, and we have very special words that represent these. You do not have these words in Hebrew. They do not exist. Therefore, every time a translation starts working with an ought, a should, a would, a might, a could, a can, you do have some verbs that entail these kinds of actions, but they do not have the spectrum of meaning verbs like we do. The way that you express these subjunctives, these off of reality relationships to an action is very different. And I'll tell you what's not present in this proverb. So by simply putting the word should in here, so what did I call it at the beginning? Who put the should in Proverbs 22:6? By simply putting the word should in there, that's quite interpretive because there's no word in there. Now, you can decide when we're done, do you think it properly reflects the spirit of the proverb? You might make that choice, but the word's not there at all. All right, so here's how it basically looks in Hebrew. All right, so those first 2 Hebrew words there, train up a child. Now, we're going to look at that word train in a minute. The word does not mean train. So it actually is going to mean something closer to the idea of inauguration. The second one is Alpane. Upon the mouth of his way. Derek. The word is derek. The way, the path, the road. And then alpane. Upon the mouth of. Upon the mouth of his way. Train up a child upon the mouth of his way. Even when he is old, he will not turn aside from it. He will not depart from it. He will not turn aside from it. So not train up a child in the mouth of his way. When he is old, he will return to it. But even when he is old, he will not have turned aside from it. It's a consistency, this training of a child. How important it is. What you do with a child is so important. But it's a proverb, not a divine promise. So we're really going to have to look at this alpane. What is alpane? So first, so this is a rare word with ample spread in similar words using the same root. So we recognize that in Hebrew you have what we call roots of a word, right? We recognize this, that I can say run, runs, running, ran. And you recognize them all as pretty much the same word. They're working with the same essential root. But you can also use them with a little bit of wiggle room in which you add other things to them. Run down, run up. Change it a little bit. It's used a little different way. Run for office is going to be a different kind of a sense than run a race. Mm-hmm. Or to having a nose that's running is very different than having a refrigerator that's running. So it connects to the initializing of things to their narrowed purpose, for good or ill, or indifferent. There's not a specific quality involved in it. It is for good or for ill or neutral. But you remember we talked in creation and we talked about the dedication of a temple, or a building became a temple, a box became an altar. That's that kind of a thing where you're literally dedicating a thing to its purpose. What you establish as the person, purpose, and direction of a child, for good or for ill or for indifference, it's this kind of idea of the inaugurating, initiating. Now, we're going to have to spread with the words. Because remember, we're using the root. When you use the root, there's 3 basic different words in Hebrew that use this root, right? 3 different words. All together, they're all connected to the similar idea. And the word is not training. The word is inauguration. And I don't want to get stuck on any of our English words. This kind of a sense. But so let's look. A statue becomes an idol in Daniel 3:2, where Nebuchadnezzar takes the gold statue that he makes of himself and dedicates it as an idol, makes it, initiates it as an idol. A building becomes a home in Deuteronomy 25. A temple in Ezra 6:17. A box becomes an altar in Numbers 7:10. This Hanak is done to the wall of Jerusalem in Nehemiah 12:27, and to David's new palace in Psalm 30. So Nehemiah builds the wall, and they have a ceremony. We do it. A bottle of champagne on the ship. We're inaugurating it, initiating it. We're launching it. But we're launching it, in a sense, to its purpose. But that purpose can be anything. Nebuchadnezzar is committing a great act of evil with this word. A building becomes a home when we move into it. Now, we used to have a thing they would do in the ancient world, and I'm not saying that every single person who ever built any building ever did this, but it is a known practice to kill one of your children as a baby and stuff it into a jar and to bury that under the corner post of your house to the house. The plum of mouth, that's a very interesting phrase. It's a figure of speech. It's an idiom. It's a way of saying something that's clear to them and opaque to us. We have lots of these in our language that are really weird to people that aren't Americans. It's an idiom. So it's a way of saying something, upon the mouth of. If I told you, upon the mouth of the numbers of the people that are there, it is a idiom, a figure of speech, and it has a very specific meaning to them. And that meaning is not way you should go. It's not what it means. So what does it mean? Let's find occurrences. Just like we just looked at, where are the places that the root of Hanak is showing up? Where does it show up? Well, it shows up in the dedication of David's palace. It shows up in the dedication of the idol of Nebuchadnezzar. It shows up in the dedication of the temple, of the altar, of a common person's home. It shows up in the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem. So it's this kind of it's this launching, this smashing the champagne on the ship. So smash a bottle of champagne over your kid's head when he is young, and even when he's old, he'll still be doing it. He'll still be going, I don't know why it always hurts here. Genesis 29:2. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep laying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone upon the mouth of the well was large. Now here it's very literal. Well, the opening, stone on it. This has led many to suggest that upon the mouth of means at the beginning. For doesn't the mouth of a thing suggest its first part? In this context, well, it seems very literal. We would consider it the first part. But is it possible that you consider the well not the first part, but the last part? Is it possible?
Yeah. You look at the wall.
How do you conceive of the well? Because you're drawing the water out of it. If you were going to work with an association of the human body, you might compare it to some other part. The departure instead of the entrance. So we already have the idea of beginning in Hanaf, the inauguration. We already have this launching, this smashing of the champagne bottle on the ship, this dedication of something, a releasing of a thing to its function, to its purpose. And we see that word can be used neutrally, or positively, or wickedly. Just so we find upon the mouth of his sack in Genesis 44:1, when Joseph hides his divining cup in the mouth of Benjamin's sack, against the mouth of the cave in Joshua 10:18, when the military commanders and rulers of the people that Joshua is fighting hide inside the cave, and they find him in the cave, and they pile rocks against it so they can't get out of the cave until they can assemble the military that they need. And so they should take all the leaders out, lay them on their face. The men of Israel come out, put their feet on their necks, and then they kill them. So we have in Judges 18:19 the phrase, keep quiet, put your hand upon your mouth. That's very literal. So with the opening of a sack, the opening of a cave, the opening of your actual literal mouth, the opening of a well, very literal. Genesis 41:40, you shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Literally, upon the mouth of you. They shall arrange themselves, they will act and live and move and have their being in keeping with what you say, what you command. These seem a little bit more literal. So if it's upon your mouth, you mean upon whatever you say, whatever you command. I think just like the mouth of the cave, now this is very much speech. They're going to arrange themselves according to whatever it is that you have to say. Now, according to the command of Pharaoh, or upon the mouth of you, or according to you, according to what you say, where the mouth is connected to people that actually had mouths. So Joseph has a mouth. So upon your mouth, hence whatever you say. We have the same thing with Pharaoh in 45:21, according to the command of Pharaoh. Literally, upon the mouth of Pharaoh. We have upon the mouth of Yahweh, upon the mouth of Moses. These are entities that actually have mouths. So it makes perfect sense to use the phrase mouth, upon the mouth of, or according to the words of. So this sets a foundation for the concept of according to, in keeping this. Then it also begins to be used for things that don't have a mouth. If all of a sudden they say, upon the mouth of the wall. Walls don't have mouths, so what am I now meaning by it? I'm actually getting very close to this idea of in keeping with. All right, so let's look at that next one. So Genesis 43:7. They replied, the man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred. They'd come back from Egypt. Joseph has taken one of their brothers prisoner and has told them to bring back the youngest brother and that they will not see his face again. They will not get another drop of food or any aid or help until he sees the youngest brother, until they bring him. And it's furious. How could you why did you even tell her that you had a younger brother?
He was questioning us. We were nervous. He didn't know what to say. He seemed to know what was coming at us.
Right? What do you...
Stop giving me a hard time, Dad. We were nervous.
The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred. Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? What we told him was upon the mouth of these questions. literally words or things, right? Words and things don't have mouths. A word upon the words, upon the mouth of these words, upon the mouth of these things. Things don't have mouths. Words don't have mouths. People have mouths. But now we've taken a step away from people, away from the physical opening of a cave, away from even the physical opening of a mouth, and have attached it to things that do not have mouths, to talking about in keeping with, according to. Could we in any way know that he would say, bring your brother down? So words and things don't have mouths. So alpane means in keeping with or according to. We answer according to the mouth or upon the mouth of his words. Exodus 12:4. It gets even more away from things. Even here, we're still talking about words, right? Alpane, at least it's the person with a mouth. Now it's a thing that doesn't have a mouth, but the thing is at least a word which comes out of a mouth. We're going to drift further. Exodus 12:4. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take upon the mouth of the number of persons, according to what each can eat, you shall make your count for a lamb. Alpane, according to. His nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of people, upon the mouth of the number of people. Leviticus 27:8. And if someone is too poor to pay the valuation, then he shall be made to stand before the priest, and the priest shall value him. The priest shall value him upon the mouth of what the valuer can afford, according to what the valuer can afford. So we get the phrase. Alpane is a figure that simply means according to. Leviticus 27:18. But if he dedicates his field after the Jubilee, then the priest shall calculate the price upon the mouth of the years that remain until the year of Jubilee. And a deduction shall be made from the valuation. We call this prorating. So the priest shall calculate the price according to the years that remain till the year of Jubilee. Upon the mouth of the years, literally, Numbers 6:21. This is the law of the Nazarite. But if he vows an offering to the Lord above his Nazarite vow, as he can afford, in exact accordance with, exactly upon the mouth of the vow that he takes, then he shall do in addition to the law of the Nazarite, in accordance with, according to the vow, in keeping with. Deuteronomy 17:10. Then you shall do upon the mouth of what they declare to you, you shall do according to what they declare to you, from the place that the Lord will choose, and you shall be careful to do according to all that they direct you.
If you like what you're hearing today, please subscribe below, and don't forget to share it on as many platforms as you can, and tell your friends to watch. Thank you.